And the 2024 draft is officially over. The Indiana Pacers don't trade any other picks. They actually trade up in the draft using cash considerations and move to 35 and take Johnny Furphy from Kansas. They also take Tristan Newton from UConn and Enrique Freeman from Akron. And here to talk with me about the Pacers draft is Michael J. Facci. Facci, how we feeling today?
Feeling pretty good. The NBA draft is always one of my most favorite times of the year. It hurt not having a first round pick, but the Pacers had plenty of picks in the second round, and I think there were some names that maybe we were intrigued by, but in the end, I think the Pacers probably went with the best available talent in Johnny Furphy, a guy who most mock drafts, big boards had him going in the top 20. So I
Mhm.
think the Pacers got fantastic value with Johnny Furphy, the man from down under from Australia, a 6'9" wing out of Kansas. I think there's a lot to like about Johnny Furphy.
Yeah, Johnny Furphy, man. I went through and looked up about 5 different mock drafts, Facci, and it was kind of all over the place, but nobody had him lower than 29, and that was one CBS analyst. They did, I think, 6 or 7 different analysts shared information. I think one guy didn't have him in the first round, but 19, 20, 23, and 29 was what I saw from CBS. Tankathon had him at 26. NBA Draft had him at 26. The Ringer had him at 20. No Ceilings had him at 20. ESPN had him at 18. So a lot of people had a first round grade on Johnny Furphy. And what's really interesting is this is a young player, 19 years old, that was on the all Big 12 freshman team here for Kansas. And it's just interesting to me because he wasn't a starter for the beginning of the year. And then Bill Self put him in the starting lineup. His numbers did get a little bit better when he became a starter. And Bill Self said, I think we found our fifth guy. And he said, no offense to my player that I'm taking out, but I just feel like Furphy's a better fit for our starting five. So cool to kind of see him embrace that role a little bit coming off the bench and then becoming a starter. It kind of shows the growth that he had throughout the season. But every person that you see talk about Johnny Furphy, you don't really see a lot of negative criticism, especially at pick 35.
Yeah, this was fantastic value. When you mentioned all those numbers, pretty much everybody had him as a first round pick. His stats on the season: 9 points per game, 49% shooting, did 35% from three, and averaged about 5 rebounds per game. You mentioned when he went to that starting lineup over the final 18 games of the season, he raised those numbers to 12 points per game, 7 rebounds per game. That
Yeah.
makes me feel like that rebounding is no fluke. And when you talk about his strengths, it's being able to get open. It's being able to move around without the ball. A really good 3-point shooter, like I mentioned, 35% from the field. I think that this is someone that can rebound, knock down threes, create spacing, move around without the ball. And most grades that I saw gave the Pacers an A across the board. I saw an A, an A minus, and some of the player comps, because those are always fun. Here's what we got: Cam Johnson, Trey Murphy the third, and you ready for this? Doug McDermott. I mean,
Yeah, I
of
saw
course,
that.
that gets sneaked in there. Just you can't escape McBuckets. We might have just drafted his replacement.
Yeah, I don't know if I see Trey Murphy the third. I would love to see that, but Doug McDermott, it does kind of feel a little bit interesting. I will say this with what tape I've seen of him, very good at cutting, right? Does a
Mhm.
good job. Not one that really puts the ball on the floor though. So I think that he's more of a catch and shoot guy and not an on ball guy, right? So that's not a bad thing because Indiana has so many creators. Now, I would be surprised if he really gets a lot of playing time this year just because Indiana's roster is so deep unless they make some kind of big trade here and they don't trade him in that deal. But I actually really think that he is a guy that could benefit from learning how the Pacers offense works. And the catch and shoot stuff is going to be so easy for him when you're playing with McConnell and Halliburton, guys like that. So if he can just constantly keep moving, I think that this feels like a very, very good pick for Indiana, especially projecting long term, knowing he's only 19 years old.
I think we knew whoever was stepping into this pick. Originally, it was going to be pick 36, ends up being pick 35. We knew playing time was going to be really hard for them to come by, and I really do think the talent is there. Indiana clearly, when they traded up, ponied up a decent amount of cash because I would like to imagine there was probably others that were trying to trade with San Antonio to get this deal done. So I think the Pacers went found a guy that they did not think would be available and went after him. I love it. But yes, I don't think that he should be playing much this year. Pretty much all the analysis that I saw after they gave compliments to Johnny was he's probably not ready this year and needs a little bit more time. And that's okay. I think there's a lot of players in this draft in specific that are not ready. And I think that he could, learn, benefit big time, being in the G League, being able to move at his own pace. And I think that as time goes on, when you're looking at to say, how do we replace the Buddy Hields or the Doug McDermott's from a 3-point shooting standpoint? And, that wing position, that size, that's been a need for the Pacers. I think they might have found their guy, and give it a year or two. Be patient. I think there's a big difference between drafting Jarris Walker at pick 8 and expecting something, and then drafting Johnny Furphy at pick 35. And I think the expectations are just a lot lower and probably where they should be from this standpoint of this year.
I mean, if so many of these draft analysts had higher grades on him, why do you think he fell to 35 with other GMs in the league?
That I can't find anything on it. Sometimes you could find that someone might not have interviewed well or anything of the sort. I cannot find why this guy, who was projected to be on many, mock drafts like we saw, 18, 20, 21, to fall to 35 is very surprising. And I have not seen anyone point to why. Defense, yeah, he's got a ways to go on that. And, other than that, I mean, I just don't think there's some sort of knock where it's like Cam Whitmore sliding because due to medicals, or Kyle Filipowski potentially sliding because of the situation with his girlfriend going on. Like, there's nothing that I've been able to find about Johnny Furphy.
Yeah, I think part of it for me, Facci, is just the fact that he is so new to the college game, right? Nobody really expected him to jump on the scene right away, and I think there was even speculation that he might go back for his sophomore season at Kansas until he got some pretty good intel from people across the league that, okay, maybe he might have something there that's a little bit more special. But I just think the fact that he is Australian, we don't have a ton of Australian players in the league, which we still have some, but a lot of them have not panned out as well as you maybe would hope they would have. So maybe that's got like some kind of stereotype attached to it. But I just say he's a totally different player than most Australians. I saw an Instagram reel where an Australian basketball analysis was talking about that, and he's like, everything that normally see from Australian basketball players, Johnny Furphy is the opposite. He's not this defensive minded guy. He's more of a guy that can actually shoot, where a lot of Australians really can't shoot in previous prospects. So I thought that was pretty interesting to kind of hear someone else's take on that. But I think it does make a lot of sense. Only averaged 9 points, like we said, for the season for Kansas. So maybe they felt like he was more of a beneficiary of the players around him that were really good. But overall, I just think that this is a guy that moves well without the basketball. If you really watch his without the ball movement, it's very, very good. And I think that's one of the reasons that the Pacers loved Ben Shepherd last year. So, not saying that they're the same player, because Ben Shepherd to me is much, much better defensively. But I would say that the shot that I've seen, the set shot that I've seen from Johnny Furphy does look a little bit more polished than Ben Shepherd.
It does look good to me. And they had him as one of the better shooters in this draft. Not saying he's a top 5 shooter by any means or anything like that. I feel like Ben Shepherd was viewed as one of the best shooters in last year's draft. Ben Shepherd was a 4-year college guy. I mean, if Johnny Furphy returned to college, he probably would have been far more of a household name next year. But I think there's a lot of guys in this draft that would have benefited from returning to college. Maybe that's just the old man in me, but I think there was enough seen to say, hey, yeah, like you mentioned, moves really good without the ball, and knock down open shots. That's what the Pacers offense is like. They want to play in transition. Furphy, plays well in transition. I think this was a really good pick. And when you're looking at pick 35, 36, depending on where the Pacers were initially, it's kind of going to be a little bit of a toss-up if this guy works out. I feel really good about Johnny Furphy having a good NBA career long-term. Just as a rookie, I want you to set those expectations real low so he can, exceed them. Kind of like Ben Shepherd. When that pick happened, we were like, there's what path to playing time is there? And then this guy started in the Eastern Conference Finals. So never say never, but I think that the Pacers are going to bring him along the way that he should be brought along. And to me, I think that's the best thing for him.
I will say one of the things that's really interesting is the Pacers got this pick 36, in the Buddy Hield deal. And so you basically think about it, you trade Buddy Hield, you get Doug McDermott back in the deal, and then basically you might get a 19-year-old version of Doug McDermott, on a much cheaper contract. That makes a lot more sense for your team moving forward. And I think he has like a different skill set than Doug McDermott. They're both good 3-point shooters, but I think they're different in how they'll play. And I think Furphy has potential to be a better defensive player than Doug McDermott is. So that to me is interesting. But I will say this.
Too.
What'd you say?
Definitely a better rebounder too.
Oh,
Yeah,
that's for sure. I mean, the fact that he's rebounding so well for that position is good. Like, Would you say it was 12-7 whenever he
12
took
and
into the?
7 over the final 18 games. So to me, the rebounding is not a fluke.
Yeah, I mean, when you're playing at a great school like Kansas, one of the best schools in the entire country, and one of the just the best schools, period, especially better than West Virginia, you really have to love.
I know what Alex is doing here. I'm sitting here trying to let him talk. I hate Kansas because of how much of a West Virginia fan I am, and I went to college with it. So that is our rival. So I'm going to be
He
honest.
hated the
I'm just
pick.
going to rip the band-aid off. I never liked Johnny Furphy. I never did, and that's because he played for Kansas. So now I need to just swallow my pride, and I need to jump on the train.
Yeah, you got Sheboy on the Pacers still, so you can figure it out. It's a good
But
balance. But getting back to serious stuff here, I had to give Foch a little bit of a joke. Jonathan Gavoni on his Instagram account said that the 19-year-old is a late blooming swingman whose size and shooting in a complementary role changed the complexion of Kansas' season and paved his way to the draft earlier than anyone expected. So I think that is a really good point there. Gavoni is one of the best, if not the best, at knowing these prospects, knowing their intel. I think that he does a great job. And then one of our good friends, Nathan Grubla, he does not work with No Ceilings anymore because he took on a different role with his job. But he put out a great tweet about Johnny Furphy. I know he really pays attention to the draft. He said, Johnny Furphy to the Indiana Pacers makes so much sense. I envision a role for him similar to what the team wanted out of late season add Doug McDermott, but Furphy, much better transition athlete and someone who can play to the pace and tempo of Halliburton and company. So guys that have really studied Johnny Furphy really like him and his fit with Indiana. So I think that means to me, like, I, I, we haven't seen it yet, so it's hard to give it a grade, but I'd say it's a win-win for both sides.
I absolutely think so. And the guys at No Ceilings who do great work, I actually saw they had an article back in February before Furphy struggled a little bit from the field of March Madness. They had him as a lottery pick at one point. This is just back in February. So you're talking about a lottery talent being snagged at pick 35. That's really as good as it gets when you're talking about that there's no off the court issues that made him slide. So that makes you just feel really good overall. The Pacers coaching staff's been able to get so much out of every player. And a guy that we had on our show recently, Ryan Hammer. Ryan Hammer loved the Pacers draft. And when you're talking about all second round picks and you love it, that says that they did the most with what they had to work with.
Absolutely, and I think Chad Buchanan did talk with the Pacers media about the draft, and so basically said that he said that he feels there's a lot of areas where Furphy has what they need. Really likes his ability to move without the ball, catch and shoot, and also crash the boards, which you mentioned. So that is exciting to talk about with Furphy. And I know that we have a lot of Australian listeners. The Pacers podcast, they
You.
do a great job. Alex Riley does a great job with his videos. Woody from Woj NBA, I think is his name on Twitter. He does a great job covering stuff, and I met him in person as well. So a lot of great Australian. Justin Beckman, I think he came on our show too. So maybe I'm saying the last name wrong. I apologize, but Justin is another staple from Australia and part of the Pacers too. So they've got a great fan base there in Indiana, in Australia for the Indiana Pacers. So for them to have another guy here that's Australian on the team, I think that's so cool for them as well.
I think it's awesome because the second he got drafted, I felt like all the passionate, Australian Pacer fans immediately hit to Twitter and, they were saying great things about Johnny. And I love that. And they're obviously very knowledgeable of, Murphy's game and, rooting for one of their own. So I think that will bring them even closer to the Indiana Pacers. And I think something like that is always awesome when you have a guy from either your country, your college, or whatever it is goes to your favorite team. It just brings you that much closer. And I'm happy for those guys.
Absolutely. Well, let's move on to the next pick the Pacers took, and that was a guard from UConn, Tristan Newton. And I think this may have been a bit of a surprise for a lot of people
It
because
was
Tristan Newton was kind of all over the place in terms of where people had him ranked. Most people had him ranked closer to 50 and later. The Pacers took him at 49 in the draft. I think it was 49 in the draft because there's only 58 picks. So 49 overall, but like I said earlier, with Furphy being, up there in terms of like a first round pick, NBA draft room had Newton at 43. Tankathon had him at 54. CBS did not have him ranked. The Ringer had him at 57 on their big board, did not have him going in the draft at all. No Ceilings had him 57th in their mock draft. ESPN did not have him drafted at all either. So this was a guy that was kind of, like I said, all over the place and not really sure what people thought of him. But I think that the fact that he led UConn in scoring, Facci, with Castle and with Donovan Clingan, 15.1 points per game, 6.6 rebounds, and 6.2 assists. He was stuffing the stat sheets, Facci, and the shooting wasn't great from three, but just or really from two. 41% from two is not great, but definitely a leader. And I think a lot of people can get behind someone that's one of those guys that knows how to lead a team to a championship.
6 foot 3 point guard out of UConn, like you mentioned, 2 national titles, a fifth-year senior, so he is more mature. That's the easier way to say it than being a little bit older. 23 years old, but you're getting a really good on the ball defender. You can score inside. Kevin O'Connor labeled him as having that dog in him. You love that. But also, I think it was Chad Buchanan was saying that they're really excited to have him be someone that they could develop, like that type of point guard, a type of guard that can be able to lead. And I think that he's very well coached, coming from Dan Hurley. I think that that's going to be awesome to have another winner. And I feel like the Pacers, when they're taking those like flyers on guys late in the draft or afterwards, I love when they're going after players with accolades. I mean, this was someone that was the Final Four most outstanding player. He was a first team All-American. This is not just some like, well, we don't really know what we got here. This is a guy that in the national championship had 20 points, 7 assists, and 5 rebounds. He's labeled as a glue guy who brings those winning intangibles. I think that this is just a pick that, how could you hate on it at 49? If it doesn't work out from long term, I think you're going to get a guy who's going to work really hard and take advantage of every opportunity that he has and bring a little bit of that winning culture to the Pacers. I thought that this was a pick that got some really good grades, saw a lot of B pluses, things like that. And I think at pick 49, it's pretty much as good as it gets. You talked about it before. Not a really efficient shooter from 3-point land, about a 33% 3-point shooter in his 5 years in college. He's at Eastern Carolina before UConn. So I think there's a lot to like. Probably a little bit more of a lower ceiling, but at pick 49, I think the Pacers did well.
I think a lot of people are kind of wondering what Indiana's point guard depth might be with McConnell only having 1 year left on his contract. There's been talks about an extension, but if they can't get that done, do they want to have some more point guard depth? Obviously, Andrew Nemhard's a big talking point as well. So you're kind of probably thinking, well, why do they draft another point guard? And I do want to say this in terms of his height. You said he was 6'3", according to what you found. It's all over the place. I've looked two different places. One said he was 6'5", one said he was 6'4.5". So if he's closer to 6'4.5", 6'5", that does help a little
Make it
bit.
better.
But I think that it's really hard to get accurate measurements
It
because so
is.
many people's all over the place with what they get information wise. But almost a 6'7" wingspan, Facci, according to No Ceilings, and I think that's really interesting as well. But very good player. Um, like you said, the shooting is something that he's going to have to work on to really stay in this league and be better, which I told you I'm not worried about shooting if they can get with Coach Jenny Busek. I will say this, though. Definitely feels like a two-way player to me.
Yes.
If you look at the two-way guys from last year, they promoted Kendall Brown, made him a standard contract guy. They brought in, I think it was Quentin Flowers is his name. I can't remember his name now. I'm having a
Quentin Jackson.
Quentin Jackson. I'm thinking of Flowers from the draft. But anyway, Quentin Jackson. Wow, I feel really stupid. Quentin Jackson, Oscar Shibwe, and Isaiah Wong are the guys currently on their two-way deals. And Chad Buchanan did mention about two-way contracts for these guys. So to me, it feels very clear to me that maybe Oscar Shibwe might get promoted to the roster if Jalen Smith walks, or at least keep him on that two-way deal still. And then it seems like Jackson and Wong might be on the outside looking in with the two guys they brought in this year. So I don't know exactly what's going to happen, but I do feel pretty good about Newton making the Pacers G League roster, specifically on a two-way deal because of what he did as a point guard and a leader. I think that they probably would feel more comfortable with him as their point guard than a guy like Isaiah Wong.
I'm right there with you. Look, no knock on Isaiah Wong. I've said it before. It's just a little bit of a low ceiling type of situation. I thought he was a good player in college, but he doesn't have the resume that of Tristan. So I think that right now, I think it's like that's a two-way guy that you want to give a little bit more time with, like you said before. McConnell, Nemhard, it's not a guarantee. There's not a lot of years on those contracts, so who knows what happens. But I think that to take a flyer on a two-way player right now, I think that you have to go with Tristan Newton on this one. And I think that Quentin Jackson was probably more of a blanking on that guy that we promoted a couple years ago from the G League that played really well in G League, but couldn't make that next step. blanking on his name,
Gabe
but
York.
Gabe York is exactly the guy. I feel like Gabe York was that guy they rewarded at the end. Hey, whatever. I think at this point, Quentin Jackson and Isaiah Wong, their time as two-way is done. At minimum, Oscar Tshiebwe is absolutely deserving of holding down that other two-way spot. We're talking about the reigning G League Player of the Year. So to me, I think that both Pacers picks aren't going to be stashes. I think these will be two-way. And when I say both, I meant both of the later second round picks. I think will be two-way guys, not stashes like last year with Mojave King that didn't nail down that two-way spot.
Yeah, there's no doubt about it. And I don't want to like sugarcoat anything because I haven't watched much of Newton play besides probably the championship game. I didn't watch a ton of UConn being so busy with the Pacers stuff. So to sit here and act like I watch a ton of them would be a bunch of crap. I'm not going to lie to you guys. So if there's people out there that know more about him, that'd be great. But I will say this, Ryan Hammer kind of compared the draft pick of Newton to an Andrew Nimhard. And I think
Wow.
that to me was very high praise because of how well Nimhard was at Gonzaga. I can kind of understand where you draft an upperclassman point guard that you feel confident in that can probably play a little bit of two if you need him to, but probably the Pacers love having multiple ball handlers. I mean,
Yes.
that's for sure. So the fact that they could have him on a two-way deal, and if somebody gets injured or things like that, they could call him up, have him as an emergency point guard. But the fact that he was on both national championship teams back-to-back years for Coach Hurley, you know that he's got as a point guard of that team, he possesses leadership, and that's one thing that you can't undersell. And I think the Pacers definitely could use more of a leader as their third string point guard and their G League kind of point guard. And I think he is going to be that person for them just because of what everybody has said about him in terms of what you read and how he was that kind of leader and most outstanding player and things like that. So the stats don't lie, though. I mean, the guy was averaging 15, 6, and 6. That's hard to do
It
at
is.
that position.
Like we said, first team All American. I think that that's something. It's crazy how you could find those guys at just about pick 50. So that says a lot. And I just think the Pacers are always interested in bringing those high character individuals, the guys that are going to work really, really hard, and that you don't have any questions about. I can't remember the last time that the Pacers have drafted someone that there was a little bit of an issue with or anything of the sort. I just feel like you're going to get someone who's going to work really hard, who's going to be a leader, even if he's a rookie. It's just someone that you're not going to have to worry about. Well, this guy likes to play a lot of video games and his work ethic's a little, iffy. No, you're going to get someone who's ready to go to work, who's fighting for, their spot on the team. And I thought that this was a good pick. You could have went a different direction and gone with someone younger that maybe never materializes or anything of the sort. I think it's perfectly good to stick Newton in the G League on a two-way deal, see what he's got, and see if that dog that's in him really comes out and shows something.
All right, let's move on to the last pick, the guy that picked immediately after Tristan Newton, and I was kind of surprised they took both picks here, Fudge. I thought they might trade one out just because why take somebody, but you know what? It seemed like guys didn't want to be drafted for some reason. Some guys that fell out of the draft, kind of like we saw with Trace Jackson Davis last year, like he ended up getting picked later, but trying to position himself to get picked in the right spot. So that's why the second round is always interesting. But they get a guy that a lot of people were high on, and that's Enrique Freeman, Facci. Played for Akron. I think anybody would be lying if they said they were watching Akron regularly. I've got family that lives in Akron. I'm not watching their college basketball team, okay? I
No,
love
they
my
were
family.
either.
But Enrique Freeman, Facci, read those stats to everybody because those stats pretty much pop off the page.
Oh, I got those stats. So 6'7" with a 7'2" wingspan, 18.6 points
Just a
per game.
correction. He's 6'8.5", so he's a lot taller than what Kevin O'Connor's telling you over there.
Yeah, I mean, look, it's just crazy out here. I think some people go with the shoes, some people go without. Whatever it is, these players are getting better by the moment because every player is
That's
growing
true
at
with
least.
the shoes on. We had this conversation about Jarris last year. He's wearing shoes when he plays basketball.
I know. I mean, look, I'm with you. We just got to go with that. I think it's
Yeah.
crazy to put someone's measurements without shoes when they're never playing barefoot.
What's
So
what I'm saying? It's
every
stupid. What are we
player
doing?
that we've drafted tonight has grown. All right. So 6'8.5" or whatever, with a 7'2" wingspan, 18.6 points per game, 13 rebounds,
Yep.
and 1.7 blocks per game. Now, if you're saying that are the 13 rebounds legit or not, he's been one of the best rebounders in the nation for the last few years, one of the most efficient players in the nation for the last few years, and he just added a three-point shot to his game. He'd only attempted 6 threes in his first 4 seasons in college. He put up 54 threes last year, hit 20 of them. That's good for 37%.
Yeah, I was going to say that's a good point to bring up, just because he developed that 3-point shot, which made him better. And I saw Kevin O'Connor's comparison to Tari Eason. I was getting a little excited. Went and watched some film on him. There's a great article that I tweeted out from No Ceilings. Tyler Metcalf did a great job breaking down his game. Do not see Tari Eason whatsoever in his game at all. So maybe that's just on me for not seeing it. But what I see here, Facci, is I see a little bit more of a polished Kendall Brown when I watch him play.
Yeah.
And
Okay.
and we know how raw Kendall Brown was when he came into the league, and we thought, man, if they can really turn him into something like that, some good size with some ability to like dunk the basketball. But like, no, like Freeman has like a back to the basket game a little bit here that I was a little bit surprised with, based on Tari Eason, because Tari Eason's not a back to the basket kind of player. So he might have had a few of those moments there for LSU back in the day. But I see Freeman more as a, almost like a, he's considered a wing, right? But he played more big man at Akron. I feel like he's like a hybrid big man that's got a little bit of Kendall Brown in him. And I'm trying to think if there's another player that I could come up with for a player comp, but I definitely do think that athletic, active, and he covers a lot of space. That is one thing I really noticed when watching some of the film that I did before we did this podcast. When he's out there, Facci, it is crowded in the paint because of his wingspan and his ability to cover ground, blocks a lot of shots, has great timing. So I really do feel like I'm not going to overhype a guy that got picked 51st, 50th, whatever in the draft, but he's got some skill to him. I think that there's potential for him to maybe carve out a role.
There's rumors that apparently the Knicks were prepared to take him at 51. So I don't think this is like some player that, all of a sudden, like, what is this? I'm going to be honest. That was my reaction when the Pacers drafted. I was like, who's that? But then when you do further research, I realized that we actually had some things in common. Both me and Enrique entered college as students. And that's where it ended. He ended up walking on the team and playing 5 years and being a really good player. I never, even stepped on the court or anything like that.
Your
So
last name starts with F.
what was that?
Your last name starts with F.
That there's another similarity. So for Enrique Freeman to be a player that was not even recruited at all, didn't even have a scholarship to Akron, walks on and
Yeah.
ends up becoming one of the best rebounders in the nation and one of the best players that they've probably had in quite some time, maybe even ever. I think he owns a bunch of records there: points, rebounds, field goal percentage, a lot of things like that. It says a lot to his work ethic, because this guy got better and better every single year. And I just feel like, and to add that 3-point shot and shoot 37%, even if it is limited to just 54 attempts, it shows that it could happen. It could be there. So I think that there's a lot to like. Yes, he definitely is one of the older players in this draft. But when you're talking about the intangibles, like that wingspan and being able to rebound like that, man, it just feels like the Pacers have some talent here that they can hone over time. They don't need to rush it, but I think that there's enough there to feel that our two-way contracts, to me, this feels like the most upside that all of our two-way players have had in quite some time. I feel like you got to remember, in the past there was guys like, I always think of Cassius Stanley, but there was plenty of other guys that, and can't remember that guy. He was actually also, he played in Australia, but he went to Louisville. It didn't work out there. It took some money. Brian Bowman. Brian
Yeah,
Bowman.
Brian Bowen the
That's what it
second.
was.
Yeah, but I was about to say it.
Those guys just could not ever crack like the team and do anything with this. I look at this and I see Oscar Sheboy, and I see Tristan Newton, and I see Enrique Freeman, and I'm like, I don't know, man. There's definitely something there where these guys could become NBA players. And I just think for that, there is a decent amount to be excited about, when I kind of just expected the Pacers to trade pick 49 or 50 for any future second round pick down the road.
Yeah, it was a little bit surprising to not see them trade the pick, like I said earlier. But to me, that says a lot about the Pacers' belief in this guy, right? Because
Yeah.
they could have easily traded pick 50, kick the can down the road a little bit, get a few more assets, right? That would make a lot of sense if you're trying to do that. But the fact that they were like, no, we want to take him at 50, we potentially want to put him on a two-way deal. It feels very safe to say the guys pretty much drafted 45 and later are two-way deal level players in the league. So I think that pretty much wraps it up there with Indiana saying, okay, this guy's more than likely going to be on a two-way deal. It's just who are they going to not have on a two-way deal anymore? And I think that's where it gets interesting. But the fact that they were willing to take him and not trade this pick to me shows me how much they believe in him. And I will say the story that you mentioned, the fact that he wasn't even a recruit to Akron and then walked his way into the NBA on a professional basketball team, that to me embodies what the Indiana Pacers are all about. They love going after guys that have a chip on their shoulder, that feel like they've had to earn everything, right? They have to prove themselves over and over and over again. And one other guy with the Pacers took as a two-way guy, I think they actually might have had him undrafted, but that's Terry Taylor. We love Terry Taylor when they picked him up, right? Because Terry Taylor was like the super undersized big that just got a ton of rebounds. Well, with Freeman, you've got a big that's got some potential because of his size and his wingspan and things like that. So he's not got the disadvantage of being shorter like a Terry Taylor did. And you mentioned it, he's working on that 3-point shot, developing that. And I think the Pacers probably feel comfortable with the fact that he's improving in that area. The fact that he shot better than Tristan Newton from three last year is a telling sign to me a little bit of Newton's inability to shoot the three and Freeman's ability to kind of grow and become a decent 3-point shooter, even though it is on a very, very small sample size. So I don't have a lot of hot takes on him right now, Facci, but I do feel like this is a guy the Pacers are clearly invested in and someone they want to see. So, my comparison of a Kendall, like a better version of Kendall Brown or a more polished version of Kendall Brown, maybe a little bit of a bigger Kendall Brown in terms of like the way he plays style wise. I think that might be a hard to say after only watching probably 5 to 10 minutes of some clips that were thrown together on a video. So I don't want to like say that I'm putting my stamp on that, but I definitely feel like if you watch some of the movements and things like that, you will see why I see Kendall Brown if you watch it closely. But I definitely feel like interesting prospect. I'm very intrigued by him and I hope that he grows because hey, cool story.
Yeah, I think it's probably the coolest story in the draft. I think this is someone that, like you said, Indiana's always targeting those individuals that are just such hard workers. And I feel like this is the last guy that you got to be worried about in terms of if he's going to work hard or not. He's fought for everything to be able to get to this stage. And I think it's really impressive. And I was reading that it's not even like he was just like, going to go to the draft and that was, a done deal. It was like, it was the Portsmouth Invitational Tournament invite, played well there. G League Elite Camp invite, played really well there. Became a participant in the draft combine. Impressed from there. It was like this guy had to fight so much just to be able to have a chance to get drafted. And I feel like it all paid off. And I think with that, you look at this draft, I think we all had low expectations. Pacers picking at originally 36, 49, and 50. What could you even do? I think everybody thought they'd draft one player. I think it turned out pretty well given the situation. You got extreme value in Johnny Furphy with Tristan Newton and Enrique Freeman. I think you got two good two-way players that you could spend a full year in the G League, have them develop, and not be like, well, what are we doing with them? Why isn't that guy playing? No, everything is just fine. We got a great team in place. These are just, good players to be able to add to our core, be a part of this environment with the coaching staff, and be able to just get to work and make this team better by being committed and working hard.
Absolutely, Fletcher. Well, we are going to wrap it up here. I know there's a lot of things that we could talk about, and I do feel bad because I did reply to somebody on Twitter today and said that I would touch on the Mikal Bridges going to New York deal and how salary cap stuff works. Look, unfortunately, with the draft and the Pacers taking three people, don't have as much time to cover that on today's show. So if you're listening to this and you're waiting for that, I don't want to be rude about it. If you really want to know and you want my answer immediately, I will give that to you on social media. Reach out to me on Twitter and I'll respond to you there. But if you're wanting me to kind of explain it in detail on the podcast, we can save that for Monday when we have our free agency reaction show. We'll record that Sunday night after free agency starts to take place. And we've already seen a lot of movement, Facci, so I would expect a lot more movement across the league. It feels like people are trying to make some deals here and there. And then, you said it's your favorite time of the year. So, hey, got a lot to be excited for on Sunday, and we're going to have a live reaction show to that.
Absolutely. And look, no matter what move happens, I remember when the Pacers opened up free agency, signed Torrey Craig right away. It's still a move. It's something to get excited about. Like, the Pacers haven't made these huge splashes, typically like a Doug McDermott or like a Torrey Craig or, those type of guys. But at the same point, you just want to see what can this team do to get better, because we saw a lot of other teams get better, and we know there's other teams that are just itching to make moves. So I think the Pacers on draft night, yeah, they didn't make that big move or anything of the sort, but they still got some money to spend, maybe not too much, but they got a little bit some. They got some decisions to make with Obi Toppin, all of that good stuff. We're going to be covering that, as free agency, begins, continues. It's one of the best times of the year in the NBA.
Facci, I will say this: your excitement about Torrey Craig just made me think of a childhood story of mine where I got in big trouble at Christmas. You ever know, like, you want something, right, and then someone gets you like a knockoff brand, and you're supposed to act like you like it, but you just hate it, right?
Oh yeah.
So I was a Hot Wheels kid growing up. I loved Hot Wheels, right? My grandparents, who have a lot of money, decided they would spend $20 or 20 cents cheaper than a Hot Wheels and buy me some Matchbox cars because they were all about saving like 30 cents. I open up my stocking from them and I say, Matchbox. And I was like so disappointed. And as a kid, you just give an honest reaction. You're not even trying to be
Yeah.
mean, but it's just like, why would you give me this? I want Hot Wheels. I don't want Matchbox. And to me, it felt like the Torrey Craig signing was a Matchbox. You're not getting your Hot Wheels, but you're getting something. It's not a bad toy, but it's not a Hot Wheel. So I'm hard to impress, I guess. But I got in trouble. My parents whooped me for it. My mom, she was not happy. She was like, go out there and apologize. You don't act like that and get over yourself. Well, I deserve that response from my mother, but I will just say this. It is funny when you talk about things like that. The things that get you excited and don't get you excited, like if the Pacers were to sign on a Torrey Craig level player, I'm not going to come on here and get excited about it. But hey, if Facci will, I appreciate you enjoying the smaller things in life.
I mean, here's the thing. I remember we did a live podcast once free agency started, and we're like, okay, what's gonna happen? They're like, whoa, we signed Torrey Craig. We're like, okay,
Yeah.
well, surely there'll be another move. Let's just keep talking. And then they're just like, I think we extended TJ
TJ
McConnell
McConnell.
shortly after, and that was it for the day. And it was like, wait, what? Like free agency opened and we signed Torrey Craig and re-signed McConnell? Like that's it? And sometimes that's what happens. A lot of the moves happen so quickly that I feel like after an hour or two, you're like, wait, who's even there? Or sometimes you're waiting days for the DeAndre Ayton situation to get resolved. You never know what's going to happen right when free agency begins. But at this point, I'm just itching for the Pacers to make some sort of move. And I know that's never the just make a move just to make a move. But I think that's where we're at in the league, where we're seeing some big trades go down. Pacers are coming off a great season. You just want to see them get better and not just run it back.
Absolutely. And one more thing, Facci, we forgot to bring this up. Lance Jones will be joining the Pacers Summer League roster. Scott Agnes had the report on that. Lance Jones is a Purdue guard. So if you don't know who that is, Pacers giving some love to a local guy here, letting him play with their Summer League team. Maybe he makes their G League team. Who knows? But Lance Jones will be playing for the Indiana Pacers Summer League team. And if you're an IU fan and you don't care about this like me, I'm right there with you. So, Facci can hate Kansas. I can hate Purdue. Chuck and Jamie, I appreciate you guys going to bat for Zach Edey, getting picked 9th overall on Twitter. Kristen Peak from Yahoo Sports wasn't a fan, said it was a
Shock.
terrible pick, but only gave him a grade C. And she said shockingest. I mean, it
Yep.
was the funniest thing. She made up a word because she was so surprised that Zach Edey was taken 9th overall. But we don't have any time to get into that right now. But Facci, go ahead and let everybody know where they can find us at on social media.
Absolutely. So you can find us on Twitter at PacersPod, STP. You can find Alex on Twitter at AlexGoldenNBA. I can be found on Twitter at _FACCI. You can find us on Instagram at PacersPod, STP. You can find us on Facebook at Setting the Pace. You can find us on TikTok, Setting the Pace. And Alex, tell them where they can check us out on YouTube.
Yeah, ladies and gentlemen, go to youtube.com/setting the pace, the Pacers podcast, where you can find all of our video content. Unfortunately, was not able to get the NBA draft preview up, but hey, we have our NBA draft recap up there, and you guys can check out what Facci and I had to say. Like today's episode, there'll be future episodes coming out. And on Tuesday, Aaron Nesmith, Pacers starting small forward, joins the podcast to talk about the season, relive those great moments, and then talk about the future, talk about some of the guys on the team. So I think you're going to enjoy the bet. Facci, if you're hoping the Pacers sign a Torrey Craig level player in free agency, then hit me with those 3 words.
Let's go, Pacers.